Hi, everybody. Welcome back into the Orange Zone podcast. I'm Samantha Croston, and today we are joined by Patrick Brown, a Tennessee beat writer for 24/7 Sports. He has been covering the football team. He knows a lot about what's going on there. Before we get started, just want to say this podcast is sponsored by Apex Entertainment. Be sure to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe. Really helps us out when you do that. Patrick, hi. Thanks so much for being here and joining us.
Glad to be here. It's getting close, isn't it? 2 weeks, 2 days. We'll all be in Atlanta here soon, right?
It's weird, because even up here in Syracuse, it's so hot and it's so summery that it doesn't feel like football season to me, but I guess it's here. I guess it is.
Yeah,
Anyway, thanks so much for being here.
yeah, it's hot down here in Tennessee too, let me tell you.
I don't doubt that. Well, listen, the reason why we're having Patrick on today is because, as I'm sure many of you who are listening know, Tennessee has a similar situation going on that Syracuse football has right now. They have a quarterback battle. Some insiders believe that the decision is getting close to being made or that there is a front runner, but nothing has been officially announced yet. It is important to mention that. So I guess, Patrick, just to start, when's the last time that this has happened, that they've even had a quarterback battle?
Well, Samantha, it was really 4 years ago. That was Josh Heupel's first season coming up from UCF. That's when they had a couple of veteran older transfers. They had Joe Milton, who was with the New England Patriots last season, now with the Dallas Cowboys. He come in from Michigan, and even before Heupel and his staff got there, they had gotten Hendon Hooker from Virginia Tech. He was sort of he arrived like right before they underwent a coaching change. It was a weird time of year. There was a lot of stuff going on. But those were the two guys that were the main guys, and Milton came in even though he was came in after the spring and won the job. He gets hurt in the second game, and then Hooker takes off and was basically a borderline Heisman finalist in 2022. The next season, when Tennessee won 11 games, they had won 3 games the year before Heupel got there. So Hooker comes in and he's like this savior, but he didn't actually win the quarterback competition. But some fans down here like to sort of point that out and say, we hope Josh Heupel doesn't get the quarterback pick wrong again. But going back to that time, everyone would have told you that Milton won the job. So, and then Hooker was the guy in 2022. Milton kind of stepped in behind him in 2023. And then last season, it was Nico Iamaleava, who they kind of groomed as the backup during Milton's season as a starter. So Nico leaves in April, as anyone that follows college football knows that whole falling out with NIL and all that. And so Tennessee had to go get a transfer to sort of backfill that room. They get Joey Aguilar from Appalachian State. Really, it was at UCLA, which is where Nico committed to. But Aguilar was a 2-year starter at Appalachian State. He comes in. He's competing with two guys that were here. Jake Merklinger is a redshirt freshman who was the third stringer last season, only played in a couple games. And then a freshman they're really high on is George McIntyre, who is another blue chip recruit too. So that's sort of been the trio that's there, but it's really been between Aguilar and Merklinger here in preseason camp.
Before we get into those top two names, you mentioned this briefly, but for any of our fans who are watching who might not be completely familiar with the ins and outs of the situation, I think it is important to explain. When you mentioned, Nico Iamaleava, I think that was a really kind of interesting, fascinating situation that I'm sure you reported on quite a bit that sort of spoke to this new era of college football and what it's really become. It seems like more of a kind of thing you would maybe previously see in the NFL, but now you're seeing those kinds of things happening here. Can you just kind of explain to some of our viewers what exactly happened in this little kind of trade, essentially?
Well, it's funny you talk about the NFL aspect of it. This would be like the NFL, an NFL team basically cutting its franchise quarterback would be over a contract dispute. That was sort of the essentially what happened. And it's sort of a first in college football, and it's kind of fitting because you go back 3 years ago to 2022, in the spring of 2022. Nico was a five-star recruit from California, had a lot of schools after him. He goes to Tennessee, commits to Tennessee, and then a few weeks later, there's a report out. I think it was the Athletic about this mystery recruit that was not so. I mean, it was you could connect the dots pretty simply, and it was Iamaleava getting a 3-year, $8 million NIL deal, which was sort of the trendsetter at the time because NIL was still in its first year. People were still kind of figuring out what it is. It was very early in the earliest stages of college football programs, really kind of using it as a recruiting tool and saying, hey, if you come here, we'll give you this much money, which is probably not what the NCAA had in mind, but it's kind of what it delved into. And that was one of the pioneering deals for not only that, but just the quarterback market now. I mean, if you want a top tier quarterback in college football, whether it's a recruit, whether it's a transfer, you're probably going to have to pay quite a bit to get him. So that was sort of the precedent setting there. And then this situation was basically You go back to the spring, there had been some talk that Nico might go in the portal in December. That might have been the better play for his standpoint to get the kind of money that he was asking for. He was basically asking for more money from Tennessee during the kind of sort of between the two portal windows in January and February. Tennessee was making some kind of overtures not to quite get to that level of money that he was asking for, but to sort of make some concessions. And then I think Nico, some people on campus believe he was going to go into the portal after the end of spring practice anyway. It gets reported that they're still in NIL discussions or whatever. He skips out on practice and goes to the coaching staff. I think he had. I think at that point it was a pretty clear where it was going, that it was going to be a split. Tennessee was moving on. Nico was going in the portal. He goes to UCLA. Tennessee goes and gets the guy at UCLA who goes in the portal in Aguilar, and here we are today. So a lot of Tennessee fans, whether they will admit it or not, will be keeping an eye on how Nico does at UCLA. Obviously, he's a great talent. He was a five-star. He was the number 2 player in the country in the Arch Manning class. Arch Manning was number 1. Obviously, he's at Texas now. So there'll be a lot of Tennessee fans curious to see what happens with Nico. But yeah, that was a pretty seismic story for college football as a whole back in April.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Out of curiosity, there's one thing that's piquing my interest, and then we'll move on to kind of this year and who we're looking at. Were Tennessee fans annoyed that Nico was wanting more money, considering the amount of money that was already being offered, or were they wishing that Tennessee was able to meet those demands?
I think a lot of Tennessee fans probably aren't or haven't been enamored with Nico's family. He didn't really have an agent at the time, and sort of his family and some advisors were kind of calling the shots for him. You never really heard anything bad about Nico, about him being some of the things that fans say he is, greedy and all this other stuff. You never really heard about that. He seemed like a pretty good kid. I just think it was a matter of him getting some bad advice. So, but he's guilty by association a little bit. It just from a business standpoint, I think there were some fans that understood, because I mean there were some quarterbacks in the portal this cycle, like a Carson Beck who went from Georgia to Miami, that were getting I think 4 million. Darian Mensah I think went from Tulane to Duke and got that much money. So they were trying to keep that competitive. I mean, this is a guy as a redshirt freshman helped Tennessee get to the college football playoff. So they were just trying to keep that competitive, but in this day and age, he's kind of just viewed as a traitor, greedy, all that stuff. Some of that stuff's true, some of it's not. But Tennessee fans, they didn't take the situation very well, and it was kind of just tough to see a guy that they had invested so much in, Tennessee the program and Tennessee the fan base that obviously invested so much in him, and to see him leave like that, I think it was obviously upsetting and caused a lot of anger. And there's still, like I said, probably some people that are going to be interested to see how he does at UCLA, and probably hoping he doesn't do very good.
Yeah, just thought it was interesting. Figured it couldn't hurt to have fans have the background on that. And I know right now, NIL is just such a big topic of conversation that I think it's important as we sort of see some of the steps and potentially missteps that some people are taking as this process continues to unfold. But now let's talk about this year. That's what Syracuse football fans are, of course, excited about. And you guys have a QB battle. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the two names that really fans have to watch. And I think you would agree with me when I say there's probably one name that's really, the top name, at least for now.
Yeah, it would be a huge surprise, Samantha, if it's not Joey Aguilar who's starting for Tennessee against Syracuse and beyond. Josh Heupel's not really a 2 quarterback system kind of guy. He played at Oklahoma. He didn't win the Heisman. I think he was the runner-up, but he did win a national title in 2000. So during those early years of Bob Stoops, so down in Norman, so he knows how to handle these situations. I think they've tried to let it play out organically, even though a lot of people, covering the team, outside the team, whatever, thought that when they added Aguilar, they were bringing him in to sort of be the starter. They have let it play out organically here in camp, letting Aguilar and Jake Merklinger sort of split the first and second team reps. And I should mention George McIntyre's had probably as good a camp as any of them. He's just a really skinny freshman who may or may not be ready yet. But Aguilar, he's been around quite a bit. I think he's from the 2019 recruiting class, so technically he's a 7th-year senior, and he's played a lot more football than the other 2 guys. So even though he just got here in May, he really did the kind of the fast track of learning the offense when he got here and sort of getting to know his teammates and things like that. So they let it play out organically, but I think steadily over the last week, a little more than a week, I think Aguilar has sort of separated himself and done what he's needed to do to sort of solidify himself as the guy. He set single season passing records at Appalachian State in 2023, coming from a junior college in California. That Appalachian State team won 9 games, played for its conference title. I think they played North Carolina and Drake May pretty close that season. I think that was the second game of the year. He kind of took a step back last season. Passer rating dropped, interceptions went up. They weren't very good around him. I think he was pressured more. He made more mistakes. Interceptions went up. So the interesting thing with Aguilar is he threw 24 interceptions at 2 years in Appalachian State, and Tennessee's quarterbacks under Josh Heupel have not thrown interceptions at all. I think their starters haven't thrown more than five, and I think collectively as an entire team, and throwing the backups that are getting in and some of these blowout games, I think they've only thrown like 18. So that'll be an interesting combination. But Aguilar, I think, has done a good job of winning over teammates. I think he's really kind of attacked, trying to learn the offense. I think that's helped him in camp sort of pull away from Merklinger, who's got some ability, but is just young. He didn't play a whole lot last season, and he just maybe hasn't performed well enough to really push Aguilar like I'm sure he would have hoped going into camp.
You've already mentioned some of Aguilar's, credentials, I'll call it, just in the, sense of he's played in a couple different places, he has some game experience. But I'd love for you to tell our fans and viewers here, what you've actually witnessed at camp that, unless we were there, we wouldn't maybe know about him. What kind of style does he have? How does he play?
Well, even going back to Appalachian State, he kind of likes to play on the edge. He'll make some throws that you're like, no, 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 but sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And Tennessee's offense, the way they spread the field and like to take shots down the field, you maybe kind of want a guy like that. He's talked about having to make better decisions and just watch them in practice. We don't get to see a whole lot. Tennessee likes to keep a lot of their stuff pretty guarded. It's quite an interesting contrast to NFL teams who have everything open during training camp, but he just looks like a guy who, even from day one, has never looked really like he just got here. I mean, he got here in mid-May. When he got here, the team was kind of dispersed between semesters, and so the team didn't really get here until 2 weeks after had been on campus. So he's new. Even though he's got 24 starts and got a lot more experience than the other two quarterbacks, he's the newest guy on campus from the standpoint of having just been here, having just learned the offense. So. But you've never really seen him. He's just carried himself like that veteran that's been around, that knows what he's doing, knows how to prepare, knows how to go out there. I think he's adjusted well to some of the technical things that they've had to do because, Tennessee wants their quarterbacks to play a certain way that maybe he wasn't, didn't have to learn at UCLA when he was there for 6 months, didn't have to play that way at Appalachian State. So he's just looked really comfortable and carried himself like a veteran, carried himself like a guy who was going to be the starter. So I think you can kind of see that out there even in the brief periods of practice that we get to see.
What would be your advice for a Syracuse defense that is trying to prepare against this Tennessee football team and likely Aguilar?
Well, I would probably load up to stop the run, and I would try to make the new quarterback in his first game in a new system try to beat you. And the other part of that is, too, Samantha, is Tennessee has overhauled its receiving core. They are very, very young at wide receiver this season. If you want to go into the scholarship numbers, I think they only have 7 scholarship wide receivers. 4 of them have never caught a snap in a college game or even played a snap in a college game. So, but there's a lot of 4 and 5 star talent there that Tennessee's sort of banking on to deliver. So, this is a team that over the past couple seasons has sort of developed into a run game defense first kind of program, which is interesting because Heupel, was lighting the scoreboards up at UCF before he got to Tennessee his first 2 seasons. At Tennessee, they set record after record on offense. The 2022 team was, led the country in scoring and total offense. And last season, they were a top 10, top 7 defense. And that's why they got to the playoff, because they had a defense and because they had Dylan Sampson, a running back who was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year, set a bunch of rushing records at Tennessee. So, unless those receivers click and unless Aguilar just comes in and just lights it up, they are shaping up to be that kind of same team, right? The same kind of run the ball, play defense kind of team. So if you're Syracuse, you're going to make, like I said, you're going to make the quarterback making his first start in a new team. He just joined 2.5 months ago, try to beat you. You're going to make some of these young receivers that maybe haven't played very much or haven't played at all, try to make catches and make plays on the outside against you. And, but like I said, Tennessee's led the SEC in rushing the last 2 years. They're going to be new on the offensive line, but big and physical. I think that group's pretty hungry too. So, I think that's going to be the blueprint Syracuse has to use. Obviously, Fran Brown coached against this offense. It's a unique style that I don't think Syracuse will really see in the ACC or has seen, but Fran Brown has seen it, and Elijah Robinson saw it too when he was at Texas A&M. So they've got some guys with some SEC experience that know how to prepare for this defense. So that makes this game it's a little bit tricky for Tennessee, right? Because they played NC State last season. NC State didn't really have a background playing this kind of offense, but Syracuse does with some of the coaches they have. So. And Tennessee's record against Georgia with Kirby Smart when Fran Brown was there was not very good. They haven't scored more than 17 points against Georgia under Heupel. So that's where I would start. And that's what makes this game sort of fascinating as the opener with really a lot of unknowns on both sides of football.
There is no doubt about that, which kind of brings me to my last question. Just what you've been covering, what you've been seeing down there, what is sort of, or I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this, but what would you say that Tennessee beat writers or even the Tennessee football team is thinking about Syracuse? Is there anything that stands out as threatening or something you had to prepare for more?
Well, I don't know. We haven't really talked too much about the game itself yet to the coaches and players. That's still, they're still at the part of the preseason where you're kind of focused on yourself. Getting into next week, they'll start getting more into prep for Syracuse. But I mean, I don't think it's going to be any, they're not going to be overlooking Syracuse at all. I mean, Syracuse won 10 games last year. Like I said with Fran Brown, he did a great job turning that program around. That's going to catch the eyes of Tennessee. Josh Heupel came in and took over a tough situation and turned it around pretty quickly. So, and again, there's the Georgia connection, there's the A&M connection with Robinson too. So, I don't think Tennessee's going to be overlooking it. That first game is, unless you're playing sort of a bye game, it's pretty easy to get up for it. So, I think Tennessee will be expecting a tough game. It should be a pretty good crowd there in Atlanta, and I think Tennessee will be ready for it. But Syracuse will be ready too. I mean, it's a chance for Syracuse to sort of show that they weren't just a one season wonder, and you get a chance to take on an SEC team that was in the playoff last year. I'm sure they'll be pretty fired up for it too.
There is no doubt about that. Patrick, tell people where they can find you and your work.
I'm at P Brown 24/7 on X, Twitter, whatever people are calling it these days. And I'm at Tennessee, or it's the Tennessee 24/7 sports site, GoVols247.com. Or GoVols247 is our X Twitter account. We're also on Facebook as well. And that is our site where you see all of our coverage. And we have a great community there and a lot of content there every day.
Okay, Patrick, thank you so much again for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Samantha. Appreciate it.
Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you back here when the next big thing happens. Thanks so much for joining us.